Welcome to the Reconnection Club podcast, the show that helps parents heal troubled relationships with their adult sons and daughters. I'm your host, psychotherapist Tina Gilbertson. Each week, I'll offer you compassion, clarity, and personal development tips designed to help you reconnect, not only with your child, but with yourself. Now let's get started. Parents of estranged adult children feel a lot of emotions during estrangement. They may feel rejected, abandoned, unappreciated, misunderstood, and a whole raft of other unpleasant things. But not all parents in this position will feel abused by their adult children's refusal to engage with them. In many cases, it would not occur to the rejected parent to say, "This feels abusive." But for some, that is exactly how their adult child's estrangement feels. I'm going to assume that your child is not physically assaulting you and that it is her refusal to return texts or emails or just her generally withholding herself from you that feels abusive to you. And I'd like to suggest that if you feel abused by these common estrangement behaviors in your child, there are undoubtedly very good reasons for that. Reasons that need and deserve your compassionate attention. It's also critical to understand at the same time that your feeling abused in this situation most likely has nothing to do with your child, and that feeling abused is probably not a new feeling for you. And I'll explain that in a moment. I want to say first that there is such a thing as elder abuse, including emotional abuse. It's ugly, and unfortunately, it does happen too often. If your adult child is your caregiver because you're in some way disabled, and you're unable to live independently, and you depend on your child for your basic needs, then if she's ignoring you, that is abuse. But if you're not legally or logistically dependent on your adult child and her refusal to have a relationship right now still feels abusive, then I believe wholeheartedly that you very likely have been abused by someone at some point or points in your life. And because of those experiences, which may have been ongoing and happened before your child was born, you developed a very healthy distaste for being abused. So if you feel like your child is abusing you by withholding contact, take those feelings seriously. But take them as a sign not that your child is being abusive, but that his behavior is triggering something inside of you that was probably already there through no fault of your own and through no fault of your child's. If your child reminds you in a negative way of his other parent, someone you had to separate from due to abuse, that is a red flag. It should tell you to be on the lookout for unhealed trauma from that relationship with your ex that may be spilling over into the parent-child bond. And it does spill over. Trauma from abuse usually does not heal on its own, and it can affect all our relationships. If you were abused in previous relationships and haven't had treatment to address the psychological impacts of complex trauma, you've probably done your very best just to move past it and keep going in life. Maybe you didn't have the room or the time or the support to seek help at the time or to get sufficient help in the time you had available. Maybe you've gotten used to living with emotional injuries for years or even decades. But now your child's estrangement is opening old wounds. This can be excruciating, and it is still possible for you to heal and to feel better. The first step is to recognize that estrangement itself is not abuse. Self-distancing is an attempt by a person to protect herself in a relationship in which she doesn't feel completely safe. Self-protection often leads to withholding contact. But again, unless you have a legal responsibility for someone, staying away from them in itself is not considered abuse. Does it hurt like crazy on the receiving end? Of course it does. To the point where you might feel like your child is torturing you by withholding contact. The way you feel about it is the way you feel about it, and no one can change that. I'm sure you would change it if you could. Nobody wants to feel abused by their own adult child or children. But in order to feel better, you must first realize that not everything that hurts is abuse. But when you have been abused, you're susceptible to experiencing any hurtful behavior through that lens. Understandably so. Once you recognize that the abuse you're reacting to is real, but that it actually happened in the past, then it's time to show yourself enough compassion and care to seek qualified help so you can work through earlier traumas in a safe and supportive environment. I started this episode by saying that not every parent rejected by an adult child will feel abused by being estranged. But there are many for whom estrangement does touch on real experiences of abuse and trauma. And if you're among those who have experienced abuse, you deserve to heal. And in most cases, I would say that that needs to happen first before you attempt to heal the relationship with your child or children. As always, parent-child estrangement can be a crucible for healing and growth if you train your focus on yourself first and your child second. I'll put some links in the show notes where you can search for a trauma specialist by zip or postal code. I hope you will reach out to local therapists and keep searching until you find a safe harbor. You can find the show notes at reconnectionclub.com/92. Until next time, remember that you are a loving, lovable, and still growing human being. So please take good care of yourself. Bye for now. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Reconnection Club podcast, I invite you to check out reconnectionclub.com. The Reconnection Club is for parents at any stage of estrangement from their adult, child, or children. So whether you've just realized there's trouble between you, you've been living with estrangement for years, or you're newly reconciled but still walking on eggshells, the Reconnection Club is your essential resource for information, support, and continued personal growth. With our courses and workshops, expert interviews, monthly Q&A calls, and a friendly, active community, the Reconnection Club is a wonderful place to be for anyone suffering the pain of estrangement from an adult, child, or children. So check it out at reconnectionclub.com.